Really quickly, before I get into today's episode, I just wanted to let you guys know the first story in this episode is another one like I've done previously in the past, where it's from a victim who was involved, a detective who was involved, or at least close to the case, and then a neighbor of the person in the story. And so just wanted to give you a heads up, so it might be a little bit different than, the normal POV, whatever. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I've heard a couple of stories about this guy in the past and watched a couple of documentaries, so I thought this would be a good subject matter. Hopefully you find this one a little bit more scary, because I know sometimes the story that on my channel, they're not scary. That story, number one, that first story, and not scary story. Yeah, so hopefully you find this one a little bit more entertaining, a little creepier, whatever. But yeah. All right, I'll shut up now. Let's get into today's stories and let me know if it's scary enough for you. I'll never forget the summer of 2006. I was a drifter, always looking for a place to crash and a good time. What had started out as a great year quickly turned into misfortune. The guy I was seeing ditched me, literally, and left me behind for another town. I had zero money, no job, and only had trouble on my mind. I couldn't tell you what brought me to that little town up north, but I can tell you what made me leave. I was living in Clemens, North Carolina, and was hanging out at a local bar, nursing a whiskey on the rocks. There's this art retreat that I tried to get into. I failed, got denied, didn't even meet half the requirements. Now I was drifting, sleeping on couches, rapidly running out of options. I wasn't planning on living in Clemens forever, but it had this quaintness, and the people had their own vibe. I wasn't exactly racing to get out of town or anything. I figured something would come along eventually, just like it always does when you need it to. And that's when I met him, Pazuzu, or Paz as he liked to be called. He came in alone and totally caught my eye, tall and lean, with dreadlocks and ink on every inch of his body. His arms and his face and his throat, everything was marked up with something. He took a seat in total silence. Didn't seem to have a relationship with the bartender, just ordered a straight whiskey. Needless to say, this guy had my attention. I moved down the bar and he started chatting me up right away. He said he lived in town. His mom did too. He'd been local his whole life. Said he owned some properties throughout the community, which once you get to the end of the story, you'll know is total bullshit. I think what he meant by property was really bodies. He had bodies buried all over the community. Obviously, I didn't know this at the time though. All I saw was this mysterious, edgy-looking guy making eyes at me from the next bar stool over. He was charming in this twisted sort of way, with a wicked grin and a glint in his eye. He invited me to stay with him and his friends, and I jumped at the chance. I mean, who wouldn't want a free place to stay? Totally free, I asked him. Everything in life should be free. The only price we pay for anything should be sin, he said back to me. I thought this was his attempt at poetry, but I'd find out just how wrong I was at the end of my stay with Paz. We got to the house and it was a total dump. I mean, I don't know really what I was expecting, but after the stories I heard at the bar, I kind of thought he had money. This is what looked like a double-wide trailer set atop a brick basement foundation. A dingy site-built home, very common throughout the Carolinas. Paz led us in through the ground entrance, where I discovered the ultimate bachelor pad. Spray paint on the walls, food in the sink, and empty beer cans cluttered on every surface. There's a dump on the outside and a putrid mess on the inside. Even carried its own moldy smell, one I'd never really experienced before. Paz didn't apologize, didn't even address the level of filth that he lived in. He showed me a room that had some semblance of normalcy, a mattress with an end table, pretty much empty otherwise. He said he rented this one out periodically, usually when he needed the money, but I could sleep there for free. For some reason, he liked me and wanted to take me under his wing. At first, it was a party. We drank, we smoked, we laughed, we lived life on the edge. The first night that he threw a party, it was just for me. literally painted a welcome message for me on the wall, adorned with this quote about how evil was the only way to live. His friends were nuts too, but nowhere near the level of depravity that Paz was on. They sat in circles and chanted, did rituals with their own blood, talked about the craziest shit that I've ever heard. Not just about the occult, but what they wanted to happen to the world. All the crazy messages painted on the wall started to make sense to me. These guys truly believed they were agents of evil, sent to bring hate to the earth. I'll admit Paz was fascinating though. His stories of Satanism and the occult, I was intrigued and a little intimidated, but I wanted to fit in. So I played along, pretending to be interested in his dark rituals and sacrifices. Honestly, it wasn't that hard. Like I said, he went out of his way to make me feel comfortable that first night, maybe even that whole first week. I was in a perpetual state of drunkenness, getting fed a steady dosage of pretty much whatever drug I wanted. He had hookups, and he somehow had the leverage to make deals and always score, whether it be booze or drugs. He claimed it was the work he did for Satan. He said the darkness would never let him go without what he needed. That is a direct quote, and he meant it every time he said it. Paz truly believed there was an evil spirit that looked out for him, paved the path anywhere he went. Regardless, I paid it no mind, enjoyed the free couch and the nonstop party. But as the days went by, things began to get weird. The house was a mess, the dirty dishes piled up, unwashed clothes scattered everywhere, holes in the wall. It was like they didn't care about anything, least of all hygiene. I was starting to hear Paz gloat about his daily services for the devil. He claimed he hadn't showered in 3 years, and by keeping his body in that natural composition, Satan had made it impossible for him to get sick. Infection was a thing of the past for him, hence the disgusting filth that he lived in. Paz used the grime and grease as a method of warding away the normal, the good, the decent. It was a repellent for anyone who also didn't worship the devil. Paz also said that he stopped brushing his teeth, which I noticed he had personally manipulated. I didn't see them in the bar, but after a few nights together, I saw the brown rot, but I also saw something else too. He had literally filed his teeth into points. He looked like he had the mouth of an animal or a demon. He did everything in his power to make himself unapproachable, and if you did approach him, like I had, you would never be comfortable around him. And then there were also the animals. Paz had all kinds of creatures, from snakes to spiders, and he loved to torture them. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard to stomach. He would torture them with different tools, like a lighter, or even put them in the freezer, claimed that he was conducting a ritual to control the weather. Satan had gifted him these animals to use to control the world around him. If he set the spider's feet on fire, it would be a warm day. If he put it in the freezer, it would be a cold, dark day. Very strange, simplistic thinking, but I will say this. It may have been the drugs or just my method of nodding and smiling every time he spoke, but it seemed like the weather actually followed his actions. If he burned the spider, I always remember the next day being a goddamn scorcher, although he could have just been checking the weather and pretending it was a magic trick. Then there were these confessions. Paz would get drunk, start talking about all the things he'd done. At first I thought he was just bragging, trying to shock me, but as the stories went on, I quickly realized that he was telling the truth. He went on at length about the piles of animals he'd killed for rituals and sacrifices. Dogs, cats, rabbits, literally anything he could get his hands on. There's nothing like taking a bite out of a still beating heart, he said at the top of his lungs one night. It's better than sex. It's better than any drug on earth. It's pure ecstasy, straight to the bloodstream. And it's even better if the animal dies while you're eating it. Talk about a rush. It's hard to take something like that seriously when you hear it in real life, but it's even harder when you're living with the person. I think I was overwhelmed with denial that this guy couldn't be as crazy as he seemed. That second week really turned the tables, as he was in a constant state of blackout drunkenness, but then would randomly recover and seemed to be coherent, well-spoken. He said it was because demons were in and out of his body, would help him get things done. Those confessions got worse. to the point of being outright heinous. Paz said he killed a number of sex workers over the last couple of years. He said they were the easiest and no one was looking for them, ever. By society standards, they were already missing, so Paz just did the work of the darkness and brought them suffering of a different caliber. It wasn't just that he was claiming to be a murderer. Paz said that he ate their corpses, feasted on them for multiple days before burning their bodies and disposing the remains in the rivers and forest outside of town. Killing them brought terror to the world, and eating them brought power to the underworld. Opening the doorway for just a moment, as he said. I remember we exchanged a look, and I think Paz could tell that I didn't believe him. He just nodded and said, "You'll see. You'll see the fires." By the third week, things had really escalated. I woke up and it was like I was in a totally different house. The smell was worse. The wasteland of trash was worse. Everything was worse. I could see that Paz was getting more and more strung out on the drugs and alcohol, teetering on violent and manic. I found him one morning painting the walls with blood. I asked him what he was doing, and he answered as if it was the most normal thing in the world. He said he needed protection soon. I wanted to ask protection from what, but decided to ask where he got that blood from. He pointed to the backyard. He said he spent the morning butchering an animal and draining every drop of fluid from it. Killing animals in the backyard was one thing, but by the next day, there were literal pieces of these animals strung up on fishing line, dangling from the ceiling. Legs, paws, ears, eyes. What wasn't suspended from the ceiling was stored in a cooler by the fridge, and Paz would ritualistically eat the raw, rotting flesh. This was when the flies started to build up, and I'm talking hundreds, if not thousands. The house was disgusting when I arrived, but it turned into something else during that last week, and Paz did not care. He liked it. Felt like it gave him power. It was a house of horrors, and for some reason, I was voluntarily living there. It was a hub for outcasts and misfits of all kinds, as was the company that Paz kept. With this spiral, though, it didn't feel safe anymore, especially not for women. I returned back to his house one night, as he'd left for the woods and I didn't want to go. When I got back, I heard weird sounds coming from the basement. When I entered, I found a group of strangers engaging in twisted sex rituals. Obviously, I recognized Paz and a couple of his friends, but the rest were unknown to me, half of them women. They were painted in what looked like blood, partaking in some of the strangest, scariest sex that I've ever seen. Masks, open wounds, and lots of drugs. Paz gave me this gross, distant, menacing stare before beckoning me over. I didn't go, simply turned and barreled back out into the cool air night. Better believe I kept running. I knew I would be leaving this house soon. I was living in a complete nightmare, and I didn't know how to wake up from it. I'd been so scared to leave before, but now I was too scared to stay. The hell have I gotten myself into? It occurred to me that everything he told me could be true, that I could end up with my throat cut deep in the Carolina wilderness, getting danced around and spit on by people using me for what they believed was magic. Finally, after weeks of living in terror, I found the courage to leave. I wish I could say it was more dramatic, but I simply bided my time until he was out of the house, then made my move. I packed my bag and slipped out of the house, unnoticed and unseen. I didn't stop running until I was out of that town, eventually out of the state, and far away from Pazuzu, Algarad. I never looked back, and I never spoke about those weeks again. At least, not until his case broke national headlines. It turned out a lot of us passing through Clemens had stayed with this lunatic. I was very fortunate to get out when I did, as I read he openly murdered more people later in life. But those memories haunt me still to this day, and I know I'll never be the same. I've seen some terrible things in my time as a detective, but the case of Pazuzu Algarad was something completely else. This guy has a rap sheet, quite a colorful history, and it's always bothered me a bit. I feel like we should have had a lot more data on this guy, but the reality is, he fucking terrified everyone that he came in contact with. The people that knew him and lived around him avoided that guy at all cost, and for good reason. Not only was he disgusting as a person, but he was very violent, very unpredictable. Everything about his persona screamed isolation, mental illness, and this open disdain for not just authority, but mankind in general. This guy was out to have a bad day every day, and he didn't make that a secret. It started from a tip from a local resident who reported a strange smell coming from the house in town, a house we all knew well. When we arrived, we found 2 bodies buried in the backyard. The house was literally covered in blood and filth. To this day, it goes down as the most disturbing case that I've ever been witness to. The home itself was a pigsty, an unbelievable amount of filth on every surface, including human waste. As we dug deeper, we discovered that Pazuzu was a self-proclaimed Satanist who had a fascination with the occult and a history of animal cruelty. He had a group of followers who were just as twisted as he was, and together, they had committed some of the most heinous crimes I've ever seen. Followers might be a strong word. A ragtag group of losers is more appropriate. But they were all loyal to Paz. They never ratted on him, didn't give up the game that they were playing, regardless of the rules or the stakes. They would just go along with whatever insane, deranged plans this guy made and laugh with him about it later. He even managed to keep girlfriends and a couple of fiancées throughout his stint. Honestly, he kind of reminded me of Charles Manson. Cunning, clever, but pure evil at his core. The difference though between Manson and Paz was that Paz was the one who wanted to do the stabbing and the killing. He didn't send in his followers. He was first in line to draw blood or drink it. He didn't want to just talk about it. His victims were mostly prostitutes and drifters, people who wouldn't be missed. Pazuzu would lure them into his house, where he would torture and kill them, then burn their remains in the woods. It was a sickening ritual, and one that he seemed to enjoy. As we investigated, we found evidence of Pazuzu's crimes everywhere. There were bloodstains on the walls, bones in the backyard, and a collection of satanic artifacts that would make your skin crawl. It was like he wanted us to know what he'd done, like he was proud of all of his crimes. The most disturbing thing was the way he seemed to manipulate people. He had this charm, a charisma that drew people in, and made him do his bidding. His followers were brainwashed, completely underneath his control. They would do anything that he asked. One of his close friends had this to say about him. He had this twisted sort of charisma. It's the kind of charisma that isn't going to appeal to everyone, but certain minds are going to be drawn in by it. The misfits, the outcasts, people living on the edge, or people who wanted to live on the edge. Here's the crazy part. We had reports from his friends that were beyond outlandish. We'd collect some of these people that were connected to Paz, jam them up pretty hard, just to get some info to help build the case. They told us about crazy sex orgies, animal killing, but they also told us something that we hadn't heard yet. Paz would throw parties wherein all the attendees would use the same knife to cut themselves open. Then Paz would drink everything that came out. We're talking quarts of blood in this guy's stomach. Absolutely disgusting, next level stuff. Like I said before, this guy had been on our radar for a long time, but it wasn't until 2010 that it all started to close in around him. He took in a friend who had shot and killed a man in the woodland outside of town, and when his body was discovered the next day, authorities had pieced the crime together pretty quickly. By that, I mean we were looking for a named suspect. When we approached Paz, he lied, misdirected us, muddied the waters of the investigation. Only later did we realize the suspect was being harbored at Paz's house. So we arrested him as an accessory, gifted him some charges that would be on his record forever. Once he was on the radar, it wasn't long before we had a warrant for his property. The neighbors were already calling in for the smells, strange sightings, threats, all kinds of stuff. On top of that, authorities had their own pile of questions and evidence that could only be answered by taking Paz and walking his property. When the officers arrived, one half moved inside to situate the Satanist, make sure he couldn't run or grab a weapon or conceal anything else. The other half of the officers patrolled the front and backyards, quickly found what we were looking for. 2 shallow graves, very near one another, housing the brutalized remains of 2 different people, Tommy Welsh and Josh Weltzer, both of whom had been missing since 2009. The handcuffs came out and we arrested both Paz and his fiancée at the time, a woman named Amber Birch, who was complicit in essentially everything. Both men had been shot and killed, but there was evidence of further desecration of their corpses, as well as possible cannibalism. We locked them up, as well as a few other accomplices, and the rest is pretty much history. The town bulldozed that shithole of a house, deemed it unlivable after they discovered what was going on within it, only to never let it see another sunrise. Paz went on to kill himself almost exactly 1 year later in prison, or at least that's the story. For some reason, I just can't believe that prick would commit suicide. He was too proud, too much of a narcissist to ever do something like that. If it wasn't obvious from his behavior, the guy was desperate for attention. Now he was on the world stage behind bars. Part of me thinks some kind of shady justice got dealt to him. North Carolina is a heavily Christian state, especially Clemens. It wouldn't surprise me if a couple of correction officers or even someone higher up made sure Paz stopped breathing that night. I can't even imagine how much he annoyed the guards in prison. This guy was constantly talking shit and giving any kind of attitude. But even now, I can't shake that feeling of unease that this case has left me with. Pazuzu Algarad was a monster, true evil, and I'm just glad that he's dead and can't harm anyone else. I've lived in this neighborhood for over 20 years, and I've seen a lot of things, but nothing could have ever prepared me for the terror that was Pazuzu Algarad. That was the name that came later, though. I originally knew him as a boy named John Lawson and his mother Cynthia. They moved in when John was still a boy, but that didn't mean he wasn't normal or anything like that. He was just about the angriest kid on the block, always blowing up and yelling threats at people. We'd see him or hear him screaming insults at his mother at least once a week, either inside the house or even in the front yard. She seemed to be a woman at her wit's end, and I could see why. John made everything difficult, and honestly, he seemed like he enjoyed doing it. It was absolutely no surprise when we would later learn he called himself a Satanist. All the clothes, piercings, tattoos, it all started to add up. Whenever we saw a pentagram painted on a sign or a brick wall, we assumed it was him and his stupid friends. At first, he was just a kid, always getting into trouble. I'd see the cops bringing him home or stop by for a chat at odd hours. His mom always apologizing, always making excuses for his behavior. But I knew there was something off about him, even back then. As he got older, things only would get worse. Starts hanging out with a rough crowd. I'd see them gathered around his house, smoking and drinking. I'd hear strange noises coming from inside, like chanting and screaming. I tried my best to stay out of it, but it was hard to ignore. We lived right there. This was right around the time that he actually changed his name. We started hearing Pazuzu up and down the block. Now, I myself, I'm a God-fearing man. I've gone to church every week for 40 years. I recognize the name that he gave himself from the movie The Exorcist. Again, I'm a Christian, but I enjoy a good scare. I remember hearing that name in the flick, so I decided to look it up for myself. It turned out that the name Pazuzu was a real demon in Mesopotamian culture. He was kind of considered the king of all demons. His surname, in the full writing, means the Lord of the Locust in Arabic. A truly frightening title for a kid who lives up the street from you. But at this point, he was starting to turn into a man. He was a legal adult. He could change his name. I only know his surname because it was spray painted in the parks. The guy was a problem throughout the community, but no one had the brass to approach him. The cops had been involved in his life since he moved to the neighborhood, but for whatever reason, nothing ever really stuck. They'd come, ask questions, then leave, then do it all again the next month. The same song and dance. I'm sure Paz and his followers said it was due to Satan and their sacrifices. Satan was protecting them from recourse, and who knows, that could have been true. It didn't last very long, as I'll never forget the afternoon the cops flooded our neighborhood. Patrols up and down the block, and a group going to knock on the door. The patrols were just in case he tried to flee, I suspect. But running never really seemed his style. Paz liked conflict, liked confrontation, and anyone in our neighborhood would definitely agree with me. But again, after a bit of questioning, they left again, this time only for a week or so. The police would later come back, much more subtle this time, and ran what was going to be a full raid on his house. He ended up stepping out and giving himself up. I'm almost positive they were prepared to kick in his door and everything. Paz caught his charge as an accessory to murder and served a short stint, as I remember him appearing back just a few months later, maybe a year at most. At this point, there was a girl with him all the time, always in and out of the house. She was nowhere near as scary as Paz was, but she had a mean face and a bad attitude. Never really had anything kind to say. We avoided her just as much as we did her boyfriend. There would be parties, loud music, sometimes dozens of people showing up to do drugs or whatever else they were up to. The rumors themselves were horrific. Sex cults, drug overdoses, abduct and kill animals from the neighborhood. All that usual satanic panic kind of stuff. We avoided the house at all cost. But even if there was any kind of racket, no one ever left their house. Music blasting, people screaming, all that going on at 2 in the morning. What do? Go over to the psychotic Satanist house and risk being murdered? Not a chance. We'd call the police and they usually wouldn't even bother showing up. Paz controlled the neighborhood back in those days. It's a mark of shame for all of us who lived there. But then 2014 came along. The real story broke. It was much the same though, cops crawling up and down the street. But this time, they actually went in the house. Lots of them. The rest paraded into the front and backyards, outfitted with metal detectors and cadaver dogs. It wasn't long until we heard barking and a whole lot of shouting. Then we heard it again. 2 hits, I suspected, and later confirmed by a voice shouting by the others. "Get the commander on the line. We've got bodies back here." It was a gruesome thing. 2 men had been buried back there for as long as 5 years. They'd been missing since 2009. Local boys. They'd likely ran with groups somehow affiliated with Pazuzu. Either someone spoke out of line, a drug deal went bad, or something occurred for Paz to kill them. Until we learned that his girlfriend had actually killed the second. A real duo made in hell, if you will. It was a huge relief to the community when both he and her were arrested and never seen in town again. By April of the next year, after the case closed and all the charges were properly filed, the city came in to demolish the house. It's a bittersweet day. Many of us were happy to see it go, especially after the police went through it. The building itself was full of blood, carcasses, and human excrement. The amount of work required to make it livable again would have been ungodly, and after so many crimes throughout so many years, it was just time to bury it, literally. The whole block came out to watch it get pushed over and loaded up into the back of a big dump truck. By the second day, there was nothing left but the rubble of the foundation. It was relieving. It still is to this day. Paz and his cronies disappeared, and apparently the guy killed himself not long after being arrested. So much for the Lord of the Locust. Although, I must confess, part of me was still drawn to the whole thing. I couldn't believe how close to my life all of this had gone down. I found myself thinking about the evil that lurked just across the street. I wondered if it would linger. And one night, I found myself curious enough to walk over to the empty lot and just look at it. I needed to see that there weren't ghosts dancing under the moonlight or corpses crawling up out of the dirt. I got over there and found nothing. Just random leftover debris from the demo. The only thing unpleasant that lingered was the smell, and honestly, it took a couple of weeks to dissipate. That level of death and decay doesn't just go away, even if you destroy every scrap of the home. It's literally in the earth at that point. The only other thing that remained was just a heavy presence. As it's when I crossed the street, I felt a weight just come down on my shoulders. Like I didn't want to be over there, but I needed to see it for myself. It was nothing. I turned back after 10 or 15 minutes of studying the area. When I did, I heard something. A voice. I don't know what it said, but it was unmistakable. It sounded like Paz. I'd heard that kid yelling up and down the street for more than a decade at that point. So I knew his voice from any others. It sounded like a laugh, but also sounded like words. "Dumbass old man," is what my brain pieced together. But here I am 10 years later, still unsure to this day. But I can tell you, there's nobody over there. I think it was just a fragment of my imagination. Years of terror have been put to rest, but my brain still thought he could be around. He wasn't. He died in a cell not long after that night. I don't hear him anymore. And the air on my streets smells better than it ever has. I've lived in this remote cabin for 5 years now, surrounded by nothing but trees and snow as far as the eye can see. It's a place where winter reigns supreme, and the storms that roll in can be catastrophic. I've learned to prepare for them, stockpiling firewood and food, making sure my generator is in good working order. This isn't where I live all the time. I inherited a cabin from a relative after he passed, and to honor the memory of the family traditions built there, I try to spend a few months out of my year residing inside this cabin to maintain many of its more delicate features, as well as escape the droning hum of city life. I came here seeking solitude, a place to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. I was a writer, or at least I tried to be, but the constant noise and distractions made it almost impossible for me to focus. Out here, I can work on my craft without interruption, and the silence is almost palpable. I felt like I was connected to my family being in that cabin, and I also felt connected to myself. I rekindled my old hobby, started making progress in a number of different projects, most notably a novel that I still haven't finished yet. My days out there are fairly simple. I wake up early, tend to my fire, and then spend some time writing. After that, I usually take a walk in the woods, exploring the trails and streams that crisscross the forest. It's amazing how much beauty there is in desolate landscape. When I'm not doing the fun stuff, I spend an incredible amount of time splitting wood, firewising the property, fixing the multitude of creaky stepboards, or splitting windowsills. The back and forth of extreme seasons is really hard on the cabin exterior, and if it isn't addressed each year, it becomes a bigger problem very quickly. My uncle left the roof unattended for 2 years and had a leak not long after. Just the name of the game living in a structure that your grandpa made with his bare hands. That is to say, it isn't winter all the time here. Spring comes and everything is wet for 2 months, absolutely saturated to the point of flooding. The last month's break and suddenly a heat wave comes in, dries everything out, and even threatens a drought. Fall brings those whipping winds that blow away the last rays of summer. Then it's dark, dreary, and snow-packed once again. Winter changes everything. The storms can last for days, and the snow drifts can reach up to the windows of my cabin, sometimes well beyond that. It's a time of quiet and contemplation, and the only sound is the howling wind and the creaking of the trees. Sometimes, the wolves will call up to the moon, but things like that don't really frighten me. They never have. What frightens me is people. This is the story from my family cabin that happened in 2001. After one particularly bad storm, I noticed something strange. Footprints in the snow, wandering around my property and out into the woods. They were light, as if whoever made them was trying not to leave a trace. This is weird because there aren't any other cabins out here for at least 25 miles. This was deep in the national forest, supreme backpacker and hunting territory, but there were about a dozen of us that had property scattered around the mountainside. Parcels of land without running water, just walls and a roof. Footprints in my area might not be the strangest thing, as there was a lake further up the mountain, but for the most part, the cabin properties were tucked away and done so on purpose. Usually if someone accidentally came upon my property, they would quickly turn around, perhaps wave if we saw each other, then go back the way they came. These footprints, however, seemed to circle around the outskirts of my property over and over again. I counted at least 5 laps, which took me nearly 30 minutes to complete. Whoever was walking around out there had some sort of agenda. I kept an eye out for anyone hanging around the woods, but as the snow melted, the prints slowly disappeared too. Never saw anyone. I just assumed it was a distant hiker passing through. The laps around my cabin were weird, but I chalked it up to being something logical, like maybe he was looking for service or something. Thought maybe my cabin would have better luck getting a signal. I looked to see what direction he may have gone after wandering off, but the overlapping nature of the tracks made it really hard to tell. 3 or 4 days went by and I didn't see anyone else, but periodically there would be fresh prints in the snow. There were these little dustings coming through, replenishing the melted snowfall on the ground. Every single time it snowed, there would be a new set of tracks somewhere outside, that same weird boot print. By the end of the week, I was getting uncomfortable with this situation, as I was totally alone out there, and there wasn't a quick way for the sheriffs to get to me. Then one morning, I actually saw him. I was fixing a cup of coffee and stoking the fire when I caught sight of something outside the window. A figure lurking at the edge of the forest, dressed in these tattered clothing with these hyper-erratic movements. My gut immediately told me that something is off. This person should not be here. I tried to get a better look, but they vanished into the trees before I even could. This shook me up so much that I didn't know what to do. Obviously, I wanted to barrel out of the door and chase after him, but something in my gut told me I would never find him. He was poking around, but doing everything in his power not to be discovered. I realized I'd been thinking about this person and situation nonstop for the better part of 6 days. Then it came to me. This was a perfect thing to write about. The following is a real piece that I wrote the morning after seeing that stranger. I've seen him now, getting closer and closer to my cabin and barn. I know it's him, the stranger from the woods. I don't know what he wants, but I know I don't want him here. Why would he walk around here for so long, and in the middle of the night, no less? The light is fading now. The shadows are growing sinister. I can feel a presence out there, watching me, waiting for its moment to strike. I'll keep my rifle close and my eyes open, but I know I'm still unprepared. What could he want? What has he seen? The days blend together in a haze of snow and darkness. I've taken to keeping my rifle by my side at all times now, even when I'm inside the cabin. I've seen the stranger's footprints every day now, always getting closer, always circling around my property, like some sort of predator stalking its prey. I feel like a rabbit before a wolf, trembling and desperate. I should go outside and empty the clip of my rifle in the air, just to remind both him and me that I'm not a rabbit but a man. I've tried to stay alert to keep watch for any sign of him. The isolation is starting to get to me. I'm jumpy. Every little creak and groan of the cabin makes me spin around, expecting to see him just standing there, his eyes fixed on me, lips poised to speak. I wonder what he would say to me in that moment. A threat? What would the last words I'd ever hear be? I've tried to distract myself with my writing, but the words won't come. My mind is a jumble of fear and paranoia. I can't focus on anything except the stranger and his intentions. I've taken to pacing back and forth in front of the windows, scanning the trees for any signs of movement. The snow is deep and untouched, a pristine expanse of white that stretches out to the horizon. But I know he's out there, watching me, waiting for his moment to strike. And then, one night I see him. He's standing at the edge of the forest, his eyes fixed on me with an unblinking stare. I raise my rifle with my heart racing and take aim. He doesn't move, doesn't even flinch, just keeps staring, his eyes boring into my soul like a cold, dead weight. I hold my breath, my finger trembling on the trigger. Then suddenly, he's gone, vanished into thin air, leaving me shaken and confused. I try to tell myself it was just a hallucination, a trick of the light and the shadows, but deep down, I know it was him, and I know he'll be back. The next day I saw his footprints again, closer than ever before. They were right up against the cabin as if he was trying to taunt me this time, show me that he can come and go as he pleases. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I was literally trapped here, alone and vulnerable, with no way to call for help. All I could do was wait and watch and hope he didn't come for me. I made a vow that if I spotted him again, I would go straight to my neighbors and tell them what was going on. As the days passed, the snow began to melt, and the footprints vanished as well. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the stranger had finally moved on. It was possible that he was a backpacker, lost between cabins, maybe a friend on the mountainside. The woods were treacherous and very easy to get turned around in. I was telling myself all manner of stories to keep the denial going. A day went by, then another. Soon, I was coasting back to normalcy. But my peace was very short-lived. One morning, I woke up to find a fresh pair of boot prints leading straight into my property. My heart sank as I followed them around my home and barn, watching as they circled each window, as if the stranger was searching for something. This was the exact kind of shit that I didn't want to find, and I knew I was no longer safe. Whoever this is was a complete whack job. All my denial went down the drain. The tracks wound back into the trees, then meandered into the barn. I can't tell you how nauseating it was seeing them stomp into the darkness of that old building, one step at a time. There wasn't even any electricity in there, so I couldn't just peek in and see what was going on. I need a flashlight, and I need to actually enter the structure. I did a full circle of the building and paused. There's no exit tracks. Whoever entered my barn was still inside there. Despite the chill in the air, my body turned to absolute ice when I realized he was probably looking out at me through the boards. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight, mind racing with the worst case scenario. As I entered the barn, I followed the muddy, snowy tracks through the stalls and bales, my heart pounding in my chest. Whoever this was, they did a pretty thorough job exploring. I followed the tracks all over and saw all the stuff they had touched. This was a pretty decent-sized barn, a few hundred square feet. Grandpa kept animals on the property during his day, so this is where they stayed throughout the winter. Now it just housed extra equipment, stuff to make repairs, and apparently some drifting lunatic hiding somewhere inside the dark. Then I saw him, a dingy homeless man with fire-red hair, hiding behind the boards and hoses in the back. He looked up at me with this crazy glint in his eye, and I knew I was in trouble. "Hey, Mr. Shonard," he said in this monotone voice. I didn't respond to him. I just watched the cold clouds of our breath reach out and meet one another. I confronted him with the rifle, forcing him outside into the cold. He was wearing ripped jeans and a dirty old poncho, had this placid look on his face, as if this were a typical Monday morning for him. The clothing he had was seriously dated. I could tell he'd been wearing the same outfit for years. His boots were all but blown out, and now I understand why those tracks look so funny. They had absolutely no tread on them. It was long worn to nothing. I kept a healthy distance and the barrel trained right on him. None of this even bothered the guy at all, though. We got out into the yard and I continued questioning him, but he just gave me these nonsense answers, his words tumbling out in a mad stream. I realized he was mentally unwell, and my fear quickly turned into pity. He was tall and skinny, almost emancipated. His hands looked severely injured, as if he'd broken them before, and they never properly healed. His red hair was frizzy and long, tucked under a beanie cap. He had a red bushy beard like a caveman. He was covered in freckles and said his name was Adam. Honestly, now that I saw him, I wanted to ask him some questions, but I knew it would lead to nowhere. I'd never find out where he came from, what his story was. Instead, I just told him to leave my property, giving him loose directions back to town. He nodded, but I could see the madness in his eyes. As he turned to leave, he produced this red Bic lighter from his pocket. "Would you take this?" he asked. "For what?" I countered. "Anything. I'm not supposed to have it," he explained. "I might use it." "What are you asking me?" I tried to clarify. "A drink, anything," he said. I eyed the lighter warily, but refused. "Just leave," I said, with my voice firm. I didn't want to get tied up with this guy any more than I already was. "You can drink some snow melt, but you can't stay here. I'm sorry, but you need to go, man." He wandered off into the freezing woodland, never looking back. The last thing that I heard was him just talking to himself. His words a dark, dreadful litany of crazy, insane things. It almost sounded like he thought he was in school or something. He referred to me as Mr. Shonard, and I could hear him referring to other Misters and Misses underneath his breath. He was having flashbacks of some kind, and I have no idea where he actually was. I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and unease. I knew I had to tell the local sheriff deputies about the stranger and those strange occurrences on my property. As I turned back to my cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I just encountered something dangerous, something that lurked beyond just the edge of insanity. As I settled back into my routine, I couldn't help but wonder if I really seen the last of that red-headed stranger, or if he would return, his madness burning brighter than ever. I wondered a lot about that lighter and what he was trying to communicate to me. He wasn't allowed to have it. What does that mean? Weird stuff, but I guess that guy was crazy after all. 2 days of calm had passed since that red-headed stranger's departure. I almost convinced myself that the encounter was just a strange anomaly, a blip in the radar of my isolated life. But then I saw it, a smokestack rising in the distance, in the area where no houses stood. The black smoke rolling away was a dead giveaway, a wildfire. My heart racing, I radioed it in, only to find out that it had already been reported and responders were on the way. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The memory of the dirty lighter that stranger had offered me lingered in my mind like a shadow. He hadn't just entered my barn, but my very psyche. He lurked in the gray folds of my brain. Too curious, I hopped in my truck and drove toward the fire, arriving just as the first wildland firefighters were pulling up as well. And then I saw him. That red-headed stranger, shirtless, waving a smoking branch around as he ran between the trees. I approached the firefighters, explaining the situation with Adam, and they quickly radioed for law enforcement support. Soon the police arrived, the fire was doused, and the stranger arrested. I watched gratefully as the chaos was brought under control. Adam didn't try to resist at all, simply surrendered to the law the moment they asked him to. As I drove back to my cabin, I couldn't help but wonder if the stranger's madness had been the spark that set that fire. I also knew I'd come very close to disaster. My property almost burned to the ground by the whims of a madman. He turned out to be a wackadoo from the next state over, had quite the reputation for getting himself into trouble, usually in the depths of winter. He was a roadside drifter, heavily addicted to hard drugs, which further exacerbated whatever underlying mental illness he already struggled with. Deputies got him to a clinic for treatment and evaluation, and I didn't hear really much more after that. What I do know is this: I think I'm very fortunate not to have fallen victim to that guy. I don't think he was actually capable of killing me, but he definitely could have set my house on fire and my barn. That was definitely a year I'll never forget. As I settled into the passenger seat, the worn leather creaking beneath me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement that washed over me. Max, my boyfriend, flashed me a tired smile as he turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life. We were finally heading home, if only for a brief visit. We both had gone to school the next city over, so home was about 7 hours away. I wanted to get a jump on the drive, but school was still in session that Friday, and Max had an afternoon class, so we weren't able to get on the road until almost sundown. This was much later than I wanted to, but I guess it really didn't matter. Being college kids, we were cultured in the art of staying up late and pulling all-nighters. Driving through the night and arriving in the morning would be no big deal. We could switch drivers if we needed to, get energy drinks, whatever we needed to make it happen. The benefit that we did have was that we were going into the trip pretty well rested. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the campus as we pulled out of the parking lot. Max and I spent the last few years scrambling to pack up our belongings, saying goodbye to our friends, grabbing a quick dinner before hitting the road. We were both pretty fried, but the prospect of surprising our families for the holiday weekend just kept us going. They didn't know we were coming, and in retrospect, that withholding of information almost contributed to our very deaths. As we merged onto the highway, the darkness seemed to swallow us whole. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the soft murmur of the radio, playing some obscure indie station that Max was obsessed with. I leaned back and closed my eyes, and let the rhythmic thrum of the wheels on the pavement lull me into a state of relaxation. "Don't die on me now," Max said as he grabbed my thigh. "I'm just resting my eyes. I said. Fuck you, Max chuckled, then tickled the inside of my leg. I jerked upright and laughed. He knew exactly how to get me. I looked at the clock and shrugged. We'd already put an hour or two of driving behind us, and Max was holding up like a champ. Max and I had been together since freshman year in high school, so this wasn't our first time driving home together. We were both thrilled to be escaping the chaos of campus life, if only for a few days. Our families would be ecstatic to see us, and we couldn't wait to indulge in some home-cooked meals and just quality time with them. Max was excited to get back, and school's little brother on the wrestling mat. Hey, check it out, we got a road buddy, I said, peering in the rear view. A pair of headlights came jetting up the interstate, but not so fast that it was alarming. Once they got maybe a quarter of a mile behind us, they took on a more neutral speed and just coasted along. I don't know why, but I always prefer having cars on the road when I'm driving late at night. It helps me feel like I'm not completely out there alone. As the miles flew by, the landscape outside my window transformed from suburbs and forest to rolling badland, hills, scrub brush, and even cactus. The GPS announced our progress in a soothing voice, the screen glowing with this ethereal light. Max and I chatted sporadically, our conversations punctuated by comfortable silences, windows where we would just jam to whatever song was on. The night wore on, the stars twinkling above like diamonds scattered across the sky. At some point I dozed off, my head lolling against the window, as Max continued driving, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The music had now changed to some soft rock station, the melodies blending together in a soothing haze. Soon, I drifted off to sleep, a temporary one that would come and go for the rest of the night. Then, without warning, our world was completely shattered. The vehicle coasting behind us had slowly snuck up, and they were now within 100 feet of our rear bumper. Suddenly, they jerked into the other lane, as if they were going to pass us, but they didn't speed up. Slowly, they crept up until our grill was level with our tail end. What the fuck are these guys doing? I asked. I don't know, it's super weird. I'm just gonna let them pass, Max explained as he started to apply the brake pedal. And then two things happened. First, the other vehicle killed their headlights. Then they swerved into our lane. Max swore loudly, jerking the wheel to the right, but it was too late. The other car slammed into us, sending our vehicle careening off the road. All I remember is searching for something to grab, all while screaming at the top of my lungs. We blasted through brush, rocks, a culvert, then everything went black. There was no vision, but I could still hear, or at least so I remember. I could hear the same song from before, except now it dribbled through the broken speakers. There was a breeze in the car now, as if the window had been opened. My hair tickled my face, pebbles littered my lap. I could taste warm blood in the back of my throat. Still, my eyes wouldn't open, or maybe they were open and just weren't working. I imagined the windshield shattering and perforating my eyeballs. The world slowly came back into focus. I found myself very disoriented, my head throbbing. Max's voice was a panicked whisper. Kendall, oh my God, are you okay? I nodded, still trying to process what just happened. Our car was stuck in the ditch, with the engine sputtering. The music was blathering on just like I heard before. The dashboard was lit up with all manner of check engine lights and error codes. It was all I could focus on in the dark. And that's when we both saw them. Two men, their faces twisted in cruel grins, emerging from the darkness like specters. They stumbled toward us, their boots crunching on the gravel and their voice slurring and menacing. They came from that car behind us, obviously, which I could now see in the red light of our brake lights. It was this beat-up old truck, rusted and covered in mud. The guys walked over and looked pretty tall, big-bellied and wearing hats and flannels. Well, what we got out here? One of them sneered, his eyes leering at me through the window. A couple of kids, all alone. Lovebirds, more like, the other guy hollered, lifting one boot and planting it in the side of the car. The whole thing rocked inside the ditch. I realized the pebbles in my lap was actually shattered glass from the windshield. There's a portion of it missing from where my head collided with it, which was why everything went black for me. I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. I gave myself a serious head injury. Max locked the doors, his hands shaking as he fumbled for his phone. I tried to call out for help, but my voice was hoarse and barely audible. The men began to circle our car, their footsteps echoing through the night and through my head as they taunted us. "You're a long way from home, ain't you?" one of the men asked, his voice like a rusty gate. "You shouldn't be here. You got license, registration?" "Fuck off," Max offered them through the glass. "Now that ain't very nice," one of them said, then went back to kicking the car. I sank into my seat and surrendered to an overwhelming anxiety. Processing the wreck was one thing, but what was going on outside was a whole new level of crazy for me. "It's a good thing we stopped you. Get to teach y'all some manners," one of the other ones said, before smashing his fist into Max's window. The glass held, but the thump was so loud that I yelped. I could see the color rapidly draining from Max's face as he looked around for something, any kind of option. His phone was in his lap, and I could see a series of failed calls on the screen, which told me there was no service. They both started tapping on the glass, their fingers like spider-like and creepy. Max and I exchanged a terrified glance. We were trapped, no way to escape. They leaned one way or the other as they crawled on hands across the glass, further confirming for me that they were drunk. Once their eyes focused on something, they could hardly keep their balance. "This is crazy," I said. "Don't worry, it's okay, we're still in the car," Max whispered. He turned the key in the ignition and let the engine stop chugging or whatever sound it was doing. That's when one of them pulled out a knife, its blade glinting in the moonlight. "Let's have some fun," he sneered. "Why don't you go get the shotgun?" The other guy, I swear to God, laughed and then turned to go back to his truck. This left just the one guy on my side of the car, who was now dragging his knife up and down my door, making this awful scraping sound. I covered my ears and begged him to leave us alone. "Oh, honey, I like it when you talk like that," he said back. And I felt my soul curl up and die a little bit right then and there. Max and I just huddled together, our hearts racing. But we knew we had to think of something fast or we'd be doomed. The men outside were drunk, but they were also vicious and unpredictable. We heard the double slam of the cab door as the other guy fetched that shotgun and began his drunken stumble back to our car. "Come get him out of the car. I want to see what this girl's ass looks like," the guy with the knife said. Suddenly, the knife was pressed against the window, its tip scratching against the glass like a fingernail on a chalkboard. I felt a scream rising up in my throat, but I bit it back, knowing it would only egg them on. Max's voice was now a whisper. "I've had about enough," he said. I could feel his muscles tensing up and his hands pulling out of mine, turning one into a fist. The other went to the driver's side door, where he slowly and quietly popped the door open. Our overhead light had been broken for a couple of months, prior to this wreck, so Max knew it wouldn't turn on when he cracked the door. He stared out through the glass and waited. "Don't," I said, but I could tell he already had some kind of plan made up in his mind. I had no idea what his plan was, but clearly it involved getting out of the car. I felt like he was putting both of us at risk. These guys outside were literally armed and dangerous. So how? The men had us surrounded, their truck blocking our only escape route. We were trapped at their mercy. The approaching footfalls brought certain death with it as well, and they were rapidly approaching Max's door. "This is it. We can't sit in here if they have a gun," he said breathlessly. So fast I didn't understand him. If he was gonna die, he wanted to at least try and fight. And he was right. The thought of getting hosed with that shotgun through the window was just an atrocious thought. Just sitting there for it, looking down the barrel of some greasy cousin fucking psycho who had one too many beers with his brother uncle. That was a fate worse than death. The guy with the shotgun lurched up to the door, but turned. He had the gun over his shoulder, barrel up in the air, and he was starting to move to the front of the car. I looked out and realized he was going to shoot us both at the same time, right through the windshield. Max quickly scrambled backward. leaned against the center console and threw both feet into his open door, which shot open so hard and fast, it clapped the guy in the back and sent his drunk ass into the dirt. Max jumped out, fell down because of the sandy dirt and downward angle, but got back to his feet and on top of the guy with the gun. "Oh fuck," the other guy said, as he began to stumble around to help his buddy. Hey! I practically crawled up onto the dashboard to get a better look. To my surprise, Max was getting the better of the guy on the ground. He wasn't punching him out or anything, but seemed to have him subdued against the earth. The guy was face down, and the shotgun was pinned beneath him, as were his arms, which Max had further secured at the wrist. They wrestled back and forth as the guy tried to turn over. I slammed a fist on the horn to alert Max, and also scared the approaching guy with the knife, who jumped at the horn blast. "He's coming!" I screamed. Max looked up and made a mistake. Let a little pressure off the guy beneath him, who somehow managed to get a finger on that shotgun. The next thing I know, there is an afterburner tracing across the left side of my eyes. My head is ringing beyond belief. I realized the shotgun had just gone off. My stomach is now doing front flips. I'm expecting there to be blood and guts everywhere, but it's hard to see because of the barrel flash. I don't see anything. All I can really see is 3 men have just paused, stopped moving. They're all checking themselves for wounds, and I can hear panic breathing. "Tim, you alright?" the guy standing up asked. "Fuck, I don't know. Yeah, I think so," he says way too loud. His ears were probably fireworks after that. Max's too. "Hey man, if you just let him up, we'll go," the guy standing up said. "This went too far, we were just kidding around." "Fuck you," Max screamed, and then to my surprise started drilling the guy beneath him with his fist, just rapid fire blows to the top of his head. "You laughing now?" The guy below him pleaded for him to stop, to which he did. Then the guy standing over ran and peeled Max off. They both struggled for a moment, but Max eventually broke off and stepped back, started to cool down. The other guys quickly got the knife and gun and threw it in the car. I sank back in my seat in complete disbelief, as Max had a discussion with them outside. They actually sounded normal now. After a few minutes, Max hopped back in the car and shut the door, and waited. He put the car in neutral and just looked out in the rear view. "What's happening?" I asked. They're gonna pull us out," he explained. My jaw hit the floor. "Are you kidding me?" "No, they now feel super bad. And not just because I beat that guy's ass," he chuckled. "They left the bar, saw our plates, and decided to mess with us. Just went way too far." I couldn't believe it, and it was super surreal when I felt the sudden tug and backward jerk of us being towed out of the ditch. They unhooked the strap, apologized again, and actually shook Max's hand through the window. He was a wrestler in high school and college, very fit, and definitely had the advantage over some drunk dude. Definitely one of the scariest, craziest nights of my life, and it only got crazier from there. Our parents couldn't believe we were there in the morning, and when we told them what happened to the car, they were just as blown away. We still all talk about it to this day. The moon cast its silver glow over the desolate road, making those towering oak trees seem like skeletons. The wind rustled through the leaves, creating this eerie whisper that sent shivers down my spine. I glanced over at Greg, who was walking with his confident stride, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Taylor, on the other hand, trailed behind us, her eyes fixed on the ground, face pale in the moonlight. "Dude, this is gonna be epic," Greg said. "I mean, who doesn't love a good graveyard run at night?" Taylor spoke up then too, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, guys. This feels really wrong. We shouldn't be going here." I chuckled myself, trying to reassure her. "Come on, Tay, it's just a little fun. We're not going to find any ghost or anything." Greg snorted. "I have no idea what you're talking about. This was literally your idea, dude." He was right. Taylor had been bugging us to make a jaunt through the cemetery. She was a little wishy-washy with stuff like that, but it was always a good time when the fun started. We just needed to get to the actual graveyard, then she would snap right back to it. Taylor quickly shot him a worried glance. "You're not taking this seriously, Greg. We're trespassing in a graveyard at night. It's not something to mess with." Greg just grinned back at her. "Oh, come on. It's just a little adventure. We'll be fine." As we walked, the trees seemed to close in around us, their branches creaking ominously in the wind. The moonlight cast long, sinister shadows on the ground, making it seem like we were being watched by unseen eyes. I shivered, despite myself. This was all fun and games to me. We lived in a bit of a small town, so there wasn't really much to do. The three of us had been doing late night exploring as a pastime for the last 3 years at this point. "Hey, what do you say we make it a little more interesting?" Greg said. "Let's turn off our phones. No distractions, no way to call for help. Just us and the dead." Taylor hesitated, her eyes darting between us. "I don't know." But Greg was already pulling out his phone, his thumb hovering over the power button. "Come on, it'll be fun. Who's with me?" I shrugged, feeling a thrill of excitement. "Sure, why not?" Taylor sighed, but eventually nodded herself. "Fine, but if we get killed, I'm blaming you two." We all turned off our phones, the sudden silence feeling like a physical presence itself. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, soft crunch of the gravel beneath our feet. As we entered the graveyard, the headstones loomed before us like sentinels, their names and dates worn by time and weather. The moon cast an eerie glow over the scene, making it seem like we were walking into some kind of nightmare, which I guess in a way we were. We just didn't know it yet. Greg naturally took the lead as we began to explore the various rows of corpses, just a few feet underground. And then we saw it, a mausoleum in the distance, its doors hanging open like a great big smile. "Welcome to our destination," Greg said, this low, dramatic voice. "Shut up, dude," I said as I punched him in the shoulder. Greg pressed on toward the heart of the graveyard, followed by myself and then Taylor a solid 10 feet behind us. It wasn't until some sudden noise broke the silence that she hightailed it to catch back up with us. "Welcome back," I chuckled. We wandered through the rows of headstones, the silence between us growing thicker than the grass on the ground. Taylor clung to my arm, her eyes darting around like she expected something to jump out from every tombstone. Greg, on the other hand, seemed to be enjoying himself, his eyes gleaming with this morbid excitement. "These are all dead people," he said. "Isn't that nuts?" "Yeah, it's pretty crazy," Taylor said. "Which do you think is the oldest?" I asked. "Oh shit, we should check them all out. I would love to know that," Greg shouted. Then we heard it, this low, guttural moan that seemed to come from all around us. We froze, our hearts pounding in unison. I think we were waiting for it to come again, but we just stood there and nothing happened for a really long time. "What was that?" Taylor whispered, her voice barely audible. Greg's grin had faltered for a moment before he regained his composure. Maybe an owl," he said. But his voice was laced with all kinds of doubt now. I was one of the few that could tell when Greg was totally full of shit. We started to walk down one of the paths between the graves, in the direction that we thought that sound was coming from. We moved on and our senses were heightened, our eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. And then we saw it, a specter lurking among the tombstones, its presence seeming to draw the very life and the air around us. I could hear all of us collectively stop breathing as we stared in horror. I was certain that it was a ghost, but the longer we looked, the more it looked like a pretty normal guy. We looked at one another. Taylor silently mouthed "what the hell" to both of us as she pointed. Greg, the ever thrill seeker, took a step forward, staring down the apparition. He was the blockhead, the brave one, so I just let him go investigate. He quietly crept toward the figure, while Taylor and I started to take steps backward, hiding amongst the taller tombstones. Then there was a noise, and one I didn't really like. Greg had yelped or something, turned on his heel, and started sprinting back the way he came. The figure out there in the darkness started to trip over himself, desperately trying to run in the other direction. We ripped after Greg, who was clearly bolting for the exit. Taylor and I followed closely behind, our hearts racing just as fast as our feet. We didn't stop until we cleared the fields of the dead, emerging into the moonlight night like we escaped some kind of living nightmare. Greg leaned against the gate, his chest heaving with exertion. "What did you see?" Taylor asked, her voice trembling. Greg's face was pale, his eyes haunted. It was a man standing over a grave plot, with his pants down, talking to himself, and he couldn't finish. His words trailed off into a horrified silence. Taylor and I just exchanged a glance, and our minds reeling with the implications. Now that Greg said what he said, yeah, the figure was doing something weird. Some kind of back and forth motion. Greg walked up on someone pleasuring themselves over the soil of a grave. We all felt a tremendous anxiety and made for home as quickly as we could. We never spoke about that night again, and for good reason. We also don't visit the cemetery anymore, although Greg has mentioned wanting to find out who that person was. He thinks maybe there could be a mystery at hand or something, but then again, he thinks like a hardy boy. Oh yeah, and to that midnight masturbator, super glad that we didn't meet. Hey everybody, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter and you can stalk me on X. Wait, those are the same thing, but different. You can stalk me on Twitter and you can stalk me on Instagram. All these links are below. Everybody, yeah. I hope you liked that episode. I enjoyed it, especially the Pazuzu thing. I'd like to do that more often. Right now, I'm currently only doing that once a month, where I kind of sneak in a true crime or, POV style true crime type of thing that people actually experienced it, talking about a subject matter that has been talked about before, but doing it in a different light, actually hearing it from people who were involved rather than just kind of like a third person type of thing. Hope you like that. Hopefully it was scary enough for you. I hope it's scary. So I know how sometimes people don't people just bitching to bitch. You know how it is. It's YouTube. It's the internet. But yeah, next week, I think we got road trip stories is next up next week. And yeah, I apologize again. This is like beating a dead horse at this point. About last week only happened one episode, but I didn't get the stories until Friday night, and by then I had too much shit going on during the weekend, and there's no way I was going to be able to find time to record. I tried. I made an attempt, but it didn't work out, so I'm like, fuck it, we'll just wait till next week. And here we are. So if you're wondering, now you know. And knowing is half the battle. And also, my nickname in high school was the Midnight Masturbator, just like in that last story. I wasn't doing exactly what that person was doing, but the nickname itself, brought back some memories for sure. And I'll leave you to figure out whether any of that is true or not. Who knows? There's a lot of detectives that listen to these, listen to my channel because they know when a story is fake and when it's real because they let me know, fake, story's fake. So you guys dig into it. You guys know. You can know what's real and what's not, and what's fake and what's true, what's false. So you let me know. Is there any truth to that nickname? All right, I'm done rambling. I'm gonna go finish up my tasks for the day, my daily duties, and then hopefully grab a beer with a couple of buddies tonight. So enjoy the rest of your Thursday. You guys have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you next week for Road Trippy Stories. Cheers.